On our morning show today from WRCO, we're pleased to have Richland County Clerk of Circuit Court Stacey Kleist in the studio with us for a return visit. We didn't scare you off the first time, I guess.
No. Thank you for having me, Phil. Thanks for having me back.
We had you on a few months ago. Yeah. We kind of briefly chatted about some of the things that you do in your line of work. But boy, it's a varied, when you talk about your job description, it's quite varied, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We're constantly shifting between all sorts of different things during the day, during the week. Statute does dictate what we do, but not always exactly how we do it. So there's a lot of variations that we can play with, and that's kind of fun.
Did you excel in civics class?
No.
No?
I don't even know. Okay, I probably, there's a teacher out there going, come on, Stacey, we did go over that, but I don't remember going over a lot of that, at least not, K-12, though I bet we did. And we took visits to the Capitol, and I'm pretty sure we probably did learn about it, but, it comes down to how much did you retain from when you were 10. And
Sure. But, do area schools still bring groups into the courthouse?
They do. We, the American Legion Post will bring students for American Government Day or Local Government Day, and that's typically in the spring. They come and they observe some court. They take tours around the courthouse. They meet with all of the elected officials, and they kind of they get an idea of what happens in the different branches of government. So of course there are 3 branches of government. And typically, they're meeting with the official when they're meeting with officials at the courthouse, unless they're meeting with members of the county board, which is the executive branch. They're typically meeting with, that's the legislative branch. Here I go. The policy setting branch is legislative branch. And so typically they're meeting with like the executive branch, which would be the sheriff's department, the district attorney, the people that enforce the laws, and then also with those of us in the judicial branch, where conflicts are settled. So.
Okay. We talked about it when you were here the last time. The Wisconsin Supreme Court paid a visit to Richland County this year, and we were kind of talking over it preliminarily. And how did it go?
It was great. It talked about students coming. I think that we had, I want to say there were 200 students from area schools. The Weston School District, Mr. Chambers, he brought a very large group of students. A number of the schools had students there, and the students were excellent. I mean, very, very respectful, very curious. Everyone who was there, I think, walked away with a little bit more understanding about what really happens with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, they're real people who decide cases. And actually, I don't even know if the cases that they heard that day, if their decisions have been released on them. That day, they took oral arguments on 2 different, basically, what could be landmark cases. And so they received what you would call arguments, but they were very civil arguments from the attorneys on both sides of those cases. And then the Supreme Court's job is the justices then they talk about it and they discuss amongst themselves, out of the view of the public, what they are going to come up with their decision, and then they choose someone from their body to write that decision, and then it gets published. So we're awaiting that at this moment. But one thing that I thought was very interesting is that when you talk about like arguments from both sides, of a case, the 2 different sides of the case, the Supreme Court justices would say, after they heard the argument from one attorney, what does your friend on the other side have to say about that? Instead of saying, and what's opposing counsel's position? So even in their language, there's like this built-in like civility and respect for opposing points of view and arguments in a case. And I thought that was very interesting, how they referred to opposing counsel as your friend on the other side of the aisle. Mm-hmm. I think we all can kind of learn something from that. And
Absolutely. Yeah, and I wonder if that's a Wisconsin thing or if that's
I
something...
think that is actually, I believe that is something that within this group of justices that they came up with some time ago. I don't think it's always been that way. It's just how this particular group of justices wants to carry out their business.
And what were some things that maybe that you learned from it? The students had a chance to learn, but you personally?
Oh boy, a lot of observations, and a lot of it was in the prep leading up to it in our work with the Capitol Police, because of course we needed to really focus on safety and security that day in the building. And I think the county in general, everyone who was involved with it, right, all the way up to top administration, the county, received some insights on things that the county can do without spending money, or not spending a lot of money, and in some cases put it on the wish list because it's going to cost money, but to increase the security in our building, safety and security. And that's not just for people who work there. That's for the people that come to do business there, because their matters that pertain to the court can only be resolved in a courthouse. Every county has one courthouse. It's not something that you can privatize. You can't privatize the services that are provided in a courthouse. So the public can't choose to go somewhere else that they feel more comfortable in, or like you would shop around like you would doing business. So safety and security of a courthouse is for the benefit of all of our citizens. And the Capitol Police had some very great suggestions of things that the county can do to improve those areas.
Are there some things that are going to be implemented then?
There's things that have been.
Okay.
There's things that have been implemented.
Good.
Some of it is in practice and personnel, and some things that were happening before but will continue to happen, and people really appreciate. Like the sheriff's department always has armed security for every court session. Some courthouses have that at their entrance. On the day of Justice on Wheels, we had an actual scanner that the sheriff's department had borrowed from another county. Everyone had to pass through that scanner at the entrance of the building, so not just coming into the courtroom. That's something that the Courthouse Security Committee, which is a committee that is, the judge has to hold these committee meetings. It's a matter of rule for judges that they do this, and they have certain persons from all different levels of county government that take part in those. And so the focus is on safety and security at those meetings. And the sheriff has discussed what it would take to get one of those scanners for Richland County so that we don't just have to borrow one, and how that might be used in the future. And so that's a matter of not just equipment, but personnel. So figuring out kind of how do you allocate the resources to those things. And I think it comes down to just a prioritization. You know, if the county board and its powers as the legislative body for the county, if they see fit that security is a priority for the courthouse, they can help establish that by helping to allocate the funds.
Mm-hmm. Something like a scanner would be something that would be used every day, not just the day of a big court case then.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's where the discussions kind of are at, is how that would be used. And ideally, it would be all the time, of course. And so maybe at first that wouldn't be practical as far as personnel allocation. But I think ideally that's where the county should try to move to. And throughout the years of being a clerk of court and serving different areas of the Clerk of Courts Association, and during my time as president of the association, particularly I had the opportunity to visit a number of courthouses. Most have more security than we have. And so I think it's good to get outside of the county sometimes and visit other places. You get ideas and you can talk to people about how did you achieve this? And particularly now that the clerks of court as a body have been successful in scoring more money for counties. And we did that through a multi-year effort of working with the Wisconsin Counties Association and with members of the Wisconsin legislature. And now that we have received more funding specifically identified for the counties, I think it should be a little easier for the counties, including Richland County, to identify and focus on, implement more security.
When you visited other courthouses, Stacy, were a lot of them older or historic buildings like we have in the county, or is it kind of varied?
It's varied, and some have built brand new courthouses, some have remodeled the older courthouses they have. A great, combination. Like recently I was in Crawford County. They're presently building a new jail. They remodeled their courthouse some years ago, and they have some great historic features. And just make a little plug, if you're ever looking for a cool historical thing to do, maybe kids would get a bang out of this, I think, but if they're history geeks like me, there's a dungeon in the bottom of the Crawford County Courthouse. It's an old jail that was used during like the fur trading times and stuff, and it makes Alcatraz look like a 5-star hotel.
Wow.
It's a very scary, but it's in the part of the original courthouse. So they have one of the older courthouses in the state, because Prairie du Chien is right there on the river. That there's a lot of history. There's a lot of historical buildings down there, but their county's done a nice job in their historical renovations, as has Iowa County. Iowa County, I think, has one of the oldest operating courthouses in the state, if not the oldest. I'm not sure. But they've done a nice job of remodeling theirs as well. Just about every county around us has done some sort of a remodeling. Grant County did a beautiful remodeling project. Vernon County did as well. And, those were done a few years ago before construction costs got just crazy astronomical. So they were smart to have done those things. La Crosse County has a newer facility. When you go in there, it's basically like airport screening. I was in Sparta for a district clerk's meeting earlier in December. Same deal there. They have an older building, the old courthouse, but then they remodeled it to put kind of like a newer security entrance on it. And same thing as La Crosse, empty your pockets, everything but take off your shoes, which I don't think you do.
Not for an airport anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty much just like airport screening. They have personnel there. It's very serious. They have the trays, the scanner. You put your purse, your cell phone, everything in the scanners, and then you go through a scanner. You walk over to the side, put your arms up, put your feet on the little marks on the floor. They ask you, are you wearing a belt? You show that to me. That sort of, because they can see, metal on you when it goes through. And I don't know what all, to the extent, because I can't see the screener, what they have. But I'm sure they pick up on a lot of objects that shouldn't be brought into a courthouse.
That's very thorough.
Yeah. And it's great. And then when you walk back out through those courthouses, you walk out through a separate door, so you don't have to pass through the screening on the way out.
Interesting. Yeah. I know we talked about juries, in the last time you were on, and important for jury pools. Did you have many jury trials this year in the county?
I think we had. I looked this up recently. I think we had 10 days of jury trial action. So that's not a lot. It was like 5 or 6 jury trials only. Those 10 days cost about $14,000. So jury trials are, they're a fairly expensive proposition, and not that costs factor into everything. There's all sorts of reasons why justice is done a certain way, and prosecutors and members of the defense, they have a certain way that they work through cases with their clients and how cases are resolved short of trial. When cases are resolved short of trial, that eliminates jury trials. It eliminates the need to disrupt citizens' lives by getting them involved in the process. And as a side effect, it does save some dollars for the county. That's not the reason that they do what they do to resolve cases the way that they do, but it certainly helps our bottom line. And I appreciate very much that that's kind of how we roll in Richland. And so on any given day, if you walk into the court and there's court activity going on, you're most likely to see things like plea and sentencing hearings or plea hearings, other types of hearings rather than a jury trial.
And we get those jury reminders in the mail from time to time, but again, it doesn't always mean you're going to serve. In fact, it sounds
Right.
like most of the time maybe you don't.
Right. The odds are ever in your favor, as they say on the Hunger Games, I think. So we pretty much have built the 2026 jury pool so far from the questionnaires that we sent out earlier in the fall. We have maybe not 200 people, but close to a couple hundred people that still haven't returned their questionnaires. And of course, we know who you are if you haven't returned it. So if you have that around somewhere, fill it out. You either can fill it out online or fill it out just with a pen and get that back to us. And don't worry if you think you got one and you don't know where it's at. We will send a second one out to those that we haven't received back. But so far, I think that we have like 600 and some people in the jury pool for 2026. So for the trials that are on the calendar coming up right now, scheduled for later January, soon we'll be randomly selecting a group of people, a panel for January from that pool, and sending summonses to those people to appear if we actually have trial action. And we keep our jury line, it's a phone line. We keep that updated with information for the jurors. That's how they can kind of keep tabs on whether they need to come in once they receive that summons.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that if you still had the phone in, because I'm sure some counties have maybe kind of gone to a different way. But to me, I think that's a reliable way to find out whether you're on the pool or whether you're needed as a juror.
Yeah, I have found it's the easiest, I think, for jurors. We use a combination of things. If we have a juror's cell phone number, we also send text reminders. If we have their email, we send email updates as well. Some counties have went to where you have to look online, but we know that not everybody has access to that. So hopefully the phone is still the steady eddy of keeping people updated, letting people know what's going on.
So people, whether or not maybe they're thinking, I can't possibly do this, it's a hardship or whatever, you still should fill out that questionnaire, right?
You have to fill out the questionnaire. The questionnaire just determines basic eligibility. It's not a summons. So if you get that questionnaire, you fill it out, return it, and if you are eligible because you're a Richland County resident, 18 and over, not a felon on supervision, and you're a U.S. citizen, those are the 4 check marks, then you go into that pool, which right now has 600 and some people. Again, the odds are ever in your favor. So from that pool, then each month as we need jurors, we will randomly select and send a summons. So the qualification questionnaire is not a summons. You're just potentially going to get called for jury duty in 2026. You do have to fill out the questionnaire. By law, you got to fill that out. But then the summons, if you get a summons for a particular month, it actually will say jury summons at the top of it. Those, if you have a hardship, you have appointments, you have vacation, whatever it would be that would make it difficult or impossible for you to serve, then you just write to me and we work something out. Like we postpone you to another month. If it's a medical issue, maybe then you're excused. But we do work with people on it.
Years ago, didn't they send the jury summons with the sheriff's deputy?
We had to do that once during my term as clerk early on, because we had a trial that during the questioning of the jurors. It was a very sensitive trial in nature. It involved a sexual assault of a child by a family member. And there were questions that both sides, the prosecution and the defense, wanted to ask each individual juror, and did so out of the presence of the other jurors, what they would call individual voir dire. Voir dire is like the selection process of the jurors. And during that, more than a third of the jurors were struck from that panel because of their own experiences or family members' experiences. And we didn't have enough people to be able to get to the final selection to select, I think it was a 12-person plus 2 or 3 alternates. So we didn't have enough people to get to the part where the attorneys exercise their strikes. And we had to call in more. That's the only time that that's happened. But then there is a statutory provision of what you do. So that was back when Ed Lineweber was a judge. And Judge Lineweber and I remember sitting there in chambers looking at the statutes. Okay, here's what we got to do. Call up the sheriff. It was Daryl Berglund. Okay, Daryl, we need your help. And we prepared 20 summons and questionnaires, because then we had to pull people in who had never received a questionnaire, and prepared 20 of those. Daryl called in 4 officers. Each were given 5 summons and find 4 locations to go. And the first 5 people that you see, are you a Richland County resident? If they say yes, then here's your summons to appear tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Yeah, not a popular way to get jurors. So,
but under the circumstances,
very rare. It's very rare that happens. It was a very unusual situation. We, always try to have enough people that appear that we're not going to run into that, but we also don't want to call in and, like if we know that it's only going to take like 30 some people to really get to the pick, we don't want to pull in 100 people. Because that disrupts 100 people's lives. Maybe we really only needed to have 40 come in or whatever. So we're always looking at those numbers. We know that when we summons, like I will typically summons like 52 people because I played with the numbers enough to know that of those 52, there's going to be however many people that have vacation, doctor's appointments, hardships, whatever, that we excuse or postpone. I want to get to a point where I have like a high 30s coming into the courtroom on the day of selection for a typical case. I don't want to call in the whole county.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, I was reminiscing a little bit as you were talking, because many years ago, a little Phil story for you, a sheriff's squad car pulls right up to the barn, and the sheriff's deputy walks into the barn. My dad says to me, "What did you do last night?" And I said, I don't think. He was there for a summons for my dad.
Oh, you're like, what hour?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Off the hook there. But Dad wasn't. He had to serve. So.
Oh, wow. Wow, yeah.
Well,
interesting.
We'll talk a little bit more with Stacy Kleist coming up here in just a little bit. She is the clerk of courts for Richland County. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about some things coming up here, collections updates and other things when we return with more on the morning show. We're back on the morning show today from WRCO. The Richland County Clerk of Court, Stacy Kleist, is our guest, and she's going to give us an update on proper ways to use our smartphone today, I believe it is.
Smartphone directions by a dumb user.
Well,
no, I don't have my kids here to help me out, so
dumb it down. But basically,
a lot of there. I'm there.
A lot of people, you're going to try to pay your bills with a smartphone, and it's a little bit different look than it is with a laptop too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that when you have court fines due, it's probably easier to navigate the wicourts.gov, what everybody loosely calls CCAP, the Circuit Court Access website for Wisconsin. It's probably easier to do that with a laptop or desktop, but it's but most of us have a computer in our pocket with our smartphones. So that is probably the way that most people are going to find whether they owe something or not and take care of it. And the state court system, maybe at some point they'll kind of like update the software for the smartphones so the look of it is a little easier. Until they do, there's just a couple of things that you have to do to get there. So if you think that you might owe a fine, and I'm talking about like a traffic fine or something that maybe you have to repay some attorney fees, guardian ad litem fees from a family case, maybe some mediation fees, things like that, then the easiest way to find out is to go to wicourts.gov, do like a little Google search. Once you get in there, then on the front page, you'll see a picture of Chief Justice Jill Karofsky. That's so you know that you're on the right page. And it says Wisconsin Court System at the top. It has the 3 little search bars over on the right on the top. You just hit those search bars and go to Services. And then it takes you to a page with like different pictures and links. The first one is for the public. And so then you select for the public. And then the very first picture that comes on the next screen is pay fees online. So then you want to go into that one. And then they make this a little more difficult. Then you scroll down because you're going to go past Supreme Court fees, Court of Appeals fees. Neither one of those are it. You want circuit court fees. So then once you go in there, you get to a screen that says fee fine search. And it explains about how there's going to be a convenience fee for use of your debit or credit card. And it has blanks where you put in your last name, first name. It asks for middle name, but don't use that. That sometimes makes the search too specific. You want to just use the basics, your last name, your first name. And then for county, you put in Richland. This is to pay Richland County fees. And then you just hit the search, and then there'll be just like you're shopping on Amazon or something where you can add to cart. You know, they make that part simple. But we also tell people if you're not sure if you owe anything, we're glad to look it up too. We can look in our software to see if you owe anything, and we can lead you through how to pay it, with your phone. One thing that we can't do, we cannot process credit or debit cards at the office, and we also can't take that information over the phone. That's for security of people's private information. We don't want your bank information. We don't want your credit or debit card information. Keep that stuff private to yourself. If you come to the office with a debit or credit card, we're going to direct you to, there's a little QR code that we keep posted on our window, and that'll take you directly to the payment site without jumping through all the hoops. If you can pay your fine in full at once, awesome. If you can't, we offer payment plans. And during the month of January, and from now, we're not to January yet, from now until the end of January, we're going to do payment plans without a fee. Typically, there's a small setup fee on payment plans. We're waiving that until the end of January, just to kind of try to get people on the right track, get those debts cleaned off in 2026, start 2027 owing nothing to the courts. That's kind of our goal. Because when people owe money to the courts and they don't take care of it, then by statute, there's certain penalties that will happen. If it's a traffic ticket, then, you could end up with your license suspended. If it is anything, traffic ticket or otherwise, any type of debt, you can end up with a civil judgment with interest. And right now, the interest on circuit court fines statewide is like 7.75%. I think it actually has come down a little bit. It was like 8.25% most of last year, I believe. And, and that can really ding your credit history, having any sort of judgment like that. And everything gets sent to tax refund interception. So you also could, lose part of your refund. And then there's also state debt collection, which is a very particular agency at the Wisconsin Department of Revenue that takes over matters and handles them the way the collection agency would, and they can even garnish right out of somebody's bank account if a person doesn't work with them to set up some sort of pay structure with them once they get the debt. So it's best to just deal with us right away and just take care of matters.
Setting up a payment plan, though, is a good idea. I mean, if as long as you're showing an effort,
Yeah.
I'm guessing they'll go lenient on you then.
Yeah, and we do. We work with people. We don't require like a particular amount. We do like to see most debts paid off within a year, but sometimes the amounts are very high, and it might take a couple of years. But if you set up a payment plan before your matter has a civil judgment entered on it, you're having a pay plan at 0% interest. And that's a pretty good deal. And then nothing else will happen as long as you keep those payments going every month. If you start missing payments and you miss 2 or more payments, then we'll take those other actions against you, like the driver's license suspension.
You still have traffic court?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah,
That's
every
probably
couple
the most
weeks.
common, right?
That's where most of the court debts come from. I will say that if it's like a $10 seatbelt ticket, please just take care of it. We probably would discourage you from setting up a payment plan on a $10 ticket.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very similar. Some things for 2026 you'd like to see maybe implemented, or some goals or anything like that, Stacy?
Well, I hope that it would be awesome if sometime in 2026 and stars have to align, meaning budgets and decisions that are outside of my control and outside the control of anyone in my department. But I would like to see the technology upgraded in the small courtroom so that we can actually have Zoom appearances from there. I know that's being worked on. That's been on the capital projects list for the county for a few years. What happens because we can't have Zoom court from the small courtroom is that when visiting judges schedule on Richland County cases, they're presiding on Richland County cases, it causes safety and security concerns to have people that are approaching the bench, basically within less distance than you and I are sitting here in the studio room, like a table's distance away. If a visiting judge has to come to Richland County on a case where, say, one party is in another county or something, and they've allowed Zoom something. The other parties have to stand hovering over like a phone that's on the judge's desk, just a couple feet away from the judge, right close proximity, court reporter. It's not a good situation. It's just the court is where conflicts are legally resolved. And that's the thing that decision makers have to remember, is that the court is the place in society, in our civilized society, for legal conflict resolution. That implies that people coming to the courthouse are in the middle of some type of a conflict. It may be family court, people that are arguing over custody and placement of their children. Emotions can be high. There are reasons that courthouses have improved their security and that they have looked at rooms like our small courtroom that only has one way in and one way out. That's not ideal. And that is where most of those hearings begin at. When emotions are the highest at the beginning of a family case, those folks are having their hearings with a court commissioner in that small courtroom. That's not a great feeling when you realize that there's only one way in, one way out. Yes, there is an armed security officer in there, and so we hope that that person never has to engage physically with someone. It's just not ideal. So part of the current hitch in the giddy up with the technology in the small courtroom is that security committee that we talked about earlier. One of the recommendations coming out of that is to maybe make some sort of a second way out of that small courtroom, which could be done. And then there would be, say that there would be a doorway or something behind the judge for them to be able to get out and other people also to get out. So if a threat was in front of one door, people can get out the other door. Just, just good idea. And so in order for that to happen, there's probably needs to be a look at where wiring is at and those sort of things. We're talking about a small, I don't know if you call it a remodeling project or whatever. I just call it a fix. Mm-hmm. It's a problem. It needs to be fixed. Let's just get to it, But things move slower in government. And, I'm 19 years into this job, and I will never quit being impatient with how slowly sometimes things move. That's just how it is, and allocating the money for it. But again, like I said, the clerks of court throughout the state have worked really super hard to get more money from the state and from the governor's budget to the counties. The whole idea of that, the intent of the legislature and the governor and voting for that was so that courthouses would beef up their security, not funnel that money somewhere else, but to use it to address the present security needs. So I'm confident that the decision makers in Richland County will use that as it's intended.
Have you ever had a change of venue during your 19 years where another county comes here for a big trial?
No, I have not. I know clerks who have done that, and I just hope and pray that I never join that list.
I was going to say
that the logistics of that can just be a nightmare. The expense of that, putting jurors up in a hotel, making the arrangements for back and forth. Because usually, if it's a case like that, you're also going to have situations like sequestration then of jurors. If it's high enough profile that you have to bring them in, you're probably, are also facing like lodging decisions. So.
But you would have to do a jury pool in the county, though. Isn't that how it works? I mean,
right.
The change of venue is because maybe...
Well, it can be different ways. It can be like, say that Vernon County tried a case here. They could be bringing their jurors over. I think there can be that where it could be they're using ours too. I think it could be either way. And I'm not sure because, knock on wood, Phil, don't bring this up.
I just jinxed you. Probably.
Phil's like, hey, I have a suggestion this would be fun. No, it would not.
No, it would not. But you hear about high-profile cases where publicity, they feel like they can't have a fair trial because everyone knows or thinks they know about what went on, and you switch somewhere else where maybe it isn't quite as publicized.
I think in this area, the challenge with that is how far would you have to go to get a jury where no one has heard about it? Because if it's high enough profile, probably the folks in the neighboring counties have heard about it too. I think we'd have to jump a few counties over. And then again, where like Madison and La Crosse media, so the folks in Madison and La Crosse, they've probably heard of it too. Where do you go to get that? So then it's maybe more... the attorneys decide that how do we craft the questions to find out, obviously like everybody's going to have heard about this unless you're under a rock. You've probably heard about it, but what biases have you already formed about it? And that's what that voir dire kind of gets at, is what each individual juror, what biases they might bring to the table. And are they able to get over those or not? And if they can't, then, they're removed from consideration.
You are an elected official, and you're planning on taking out papers again, or is it too early to ask?
I do plan. I do plan to run again, though. It's for clerks of court and sheriffs. They run at the same time, and those are partisan offices. So the elections are in the fall, whereas upcoming first are the spring elections. 2026, even numbered years. So things like city council, county board, school boards, those are your spring elections. Township boards, nonpartisan stuff happens in the spring. So those are the folks that would be taken out and circulating papers now. For the clerks of courts and the sheriff, that's not until later in the year.
I think about your background. I don't know how many clerks of court have had a background in newspaper and in radio. I presume that may have helped you somewhere along the line.
It definitely has. I think probably I think I'm the only one in the state. I know I'm the only one in the state that's been a radio news director. And though I have met plenty of clerks of courts that had the education background, similar to mine, where there was journalism, a lot of like writing and speaking emphasis. But definitely it helped me so much. It helped me to get to know this community, particularly in how things like county boards and city councils and school boards operate. I understood who sets the rules, who sets, the county board, sets the policy. The county board is the legislative body in our county, and now we have a county administrator. So, join with that, the administrator in our county structure. But I got to see what kind of things go in front of them and how that process works. So then when I came aboard and knew that there were requests that I would need to make, I knew that eventually my request would end up in front of the county board. What I didn't understand were all the various committees that were all the different hoops that a person in county government has to jump through as they're making those requests. And that's a good thing because that's protection of our tax dollars.
Maybe, again, you could kind of give us a little bit of your job description because you wear a lot of hats there.
Yeah, we're the jury manager for the county. We're the financial clearinghouse for the matters that are owed, like the ones that we talked about. We're the data center for all court records, and we ensure access to the courts. That's the big one. And the Wisconsin Clerks of Circuit Court, when they looked at kind of rebranding and how they started a few years ago before they started the push for more money for the counties, how do we get people in the legislature to even understand what we do? Because the realization was there of, hey, our own people on the county boards don't understand what we do. How do we expect our state lawmakers to understand what we do? And our job is to talk to them and to educate them on what we do. And so we're like, well, we need kind of a quick slogan. We need something, and we determined we are access to the courts. That's really what we do. We're the front line of you need to file a case, you come to the clerk of court's office. You need to pay a fine, come into the clerk of court's office. We can schedule hearings, but we don't decide the outcome of the hearings. But we can explain the process of how you get a hearing in front of a judge. We're the access for the system.
Looking ahead, again, you just want to make people aware that they need to get their surveys back if they haven't done that to be a juror in 2026.
Yep. Either find your questionnaire and get it back to us, or we'll send you another one, and then please, fill that out and send it back. And don't worry that you didn't get the first one back. We're not like that. We're very friendly clerk of court office, and I think that's what you would find. I think my colleagues in the other 71 counties, they are the same way. We really appreciate the service that citizens provide to our courts.
And you probably have some citizens that are gung-ho, like, all right.
Yeah.
And others that are like, oh, no, dread it.
We have people that ask if they can volunteer and can't. And there's, obvious reasons why you couldn't volunteer, because people could really stack a jury. It has to be a random process. But we also have people who say, man, I get summons like every 4 years, or I get a questionnaire and my wife has never gotten one. Can't you get her in there? Can't I give this to her? Can't you put her name in instead? No, we can't do that. It truly is the luck of the draw. And I don't know what to tell you. It's the records all originate from that interface between the courts and the Department of Transportation. We're not going out there and handpicking people. It's just blindly we're relying on that interface to give us the names.
Yeah, interesting stuff, Stacy. Come back and see us in the new year.
I will. Thank you for having me, Phil.
Yeah, always a pleasure. You bet. Stacy Kleiss, Circuit Clerk of Court for Richland County, joining us here on WRCO's Morning Show, and we'll have more coming up tomorrow, the final day of the year.